podcast. I'm going to do a history book review this evening, and this is one I've pretty much been putting off for a good couple of months now. I listened to this book on Audible. God, it must have been about 3 or 4 months ago now. I was actually painting my daughter's room and listening to the book at the same time. And so the book it's not an exceptionally long book, but it was roughly about 8 hours on Audible. And I was able to pick it up. It's actually, sorry, apologies. It is 17 hours, and 31 minutes. So I must have missed out. It's roughly about 18 hours on my version. It's a fantastic book. Lone Star Nation, this is called, and it's called how a ragged army of courageous volunteers won the battle for Texan independence, by the famous American historian H.W. Brands. He is fantastic, very, very much a mainstream historian. You're not going to get an awful lot of controversy from H.W. Brands. He is the sort of the vanilla guy, the vanilla historian guy. Anybody who's venerated, he venerates. Anybody who vilified, he vilifies. He doesn't really sort of detract too much from the mainstream narrative of history, particularly with regards to American history as well. But I mean, as an introduction to the topic, I thought it was a fantastic one to pick up myself personally, and this one is an exceptionally good book. I did enjoy it, read by I think it's Texan as well, Chuck Montgomery. He has that sort of southern twang to his voice, which gives it extra flavour and immerses you more into the topic as well. But yeah, I mean, this book was a brand new topic for me to explore, and I was very much enjoyed listening to it, I will say. Right, so before I get into any of the content of the book, what I'll do, and I'll ask you kindly, if you wouldn't mind, subscribing to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Give the video a like as well if you possibly can. Do that very much go towards positive analytics, fingers crossed. And also as well then share the video if you did enjoy it, and give me a comment, and can recommend any other Texan independence books as well. I very much appreciate that as well then. So onwards then. So the book itself, in a nutshell, this is the all-encompassing story about how the Texan Independence War was fought, and the transformation from a remote Spanish, then Mexican outpost in the northern reaches of that territory to become its own republic, become its own nation, and fought for its own statehood, and later on as well, and to become a state within the United States. But in the book early on, we're introduced to a few characters who are loom large with Texan folklore, Texan history, American history as well. The first couple I should say, are both Moses and Steve Austin. So not the wrestler Stone Cold Steve Austin, but Stephen Austin in particular was an American citizen who, seeking some further fortune and effectively moving, as Americans did, in the 18th century and the 19th century, move further west in order to, make your own sort of paradise, make your own settlements, whether that would be from religious persecution like the Mormons, or it could be through ethnic migration, forced ethnic migration, in the sense of the Native Americans and the Trail of Tears. It could also just be the fact that you have people wanting to spill over into new territories purely because of population and also the lack of available opportunity in certain areas. But Stephen Austin was one of these, with his father Moses Austin, and Stephen Austin's idea was to take 300 or around 300 families and purchase 300 packets of land from, firstly was the Spanish government based in New Mexico in God, I can't remember, Mexico City, I should say, sorry, and then later on then, when we do have the Mexican independence themselves and they free from the Spanish crown, later on then to make sure that this agreement is upheld again then. So we have this settlement, we have these people who are going to settle near the Brazos River in Mexico. You already have people in Texas at this time, so without going any further, without the Anglo-American people coming across the border from the east, you already have people who've migrated north who are Spanish ancestral origin, Tejanos, settled within there. Maybe been settled for a couple of decades already in Texas, but it wasn't a very populous region for the Mexican government at this time anyways. But also you have several Native American tribes living there as well, such as the Kalakaua, I think it is the Comanche as well, living there too. So you do have quite a few native groups still there as well, without putting them to one side. But Stephen Austin was effectively the one who spearheaded this sort of migration movement in Texas. People were offered money, they were offered inducements to come and immigrate from America into Texas in order to fill up that population, fill up that region, so that the Mexican authorities were able to derive taxes from Texas. Also then to solidify the border with the ever expanding, the ever growing former colonies, now United States. They really wanted to make sure that they put a bit of a block on the southwest of the North American continent to them. So Stephen Austin is encouraging people to immigrate. We have then other players in this book, which is namely Sam Houston. So Sam Houston, the city in Texas named after Houston, Texas. Sam Houston was a commander in the U.S. Army. He is a devotee and acolyte of the then president in the 1830s, Andrew Jackson. So he's very much a Jacksonian Democrat. Jacksonianism is more of your rugged frontiersman, individual liberty, low taxes, government get off my back, no overbearing regulation, no interference from finance or money men. Really sort of rugged frontiersman sort of ideology. Houston is a bit of a up-and-coming superstar of commander. He is trying to position himself as a prominent politician, going into the sort of the 1830s decade, 1820s, 1830s decades. But he's had a few setbacks in his life, Sam Houston, which really renders him unable to fulfill the sort of easy path that he was on, really effectively, to become a US senator and then possibly even run for president himself, or even become a famous general himself in the US Army. So he has a lot of setbacks, addiction to alcoholism and gambling and so forth, but we pick up with Houston a little bit later anyways. Other characters we have are the famous Jim Bowie, so known for the Bowie knife, big knife about this long, massive blade, but Jim Bowie is a trader, sometime slave trader, smuggler and land speculator. So Jim Bowie is very much of your frontiersman at this time, frontiersman and go Indian fighter, call it for what you will. The guy operates primarily outside of the law and derives his benefits of the law, and firmly make sure that he doesn't lose out, in the sense of make sure he doesn't lose out financially. Jim Bowie was exceptionally wealthy man, particularly in the late 1820s, 1830s. Had been known as a vicious fighter, as a very aggressive man, but yet very much a man who you would want to be led by, and you would never bet against in a fight as well. So, introduced to Jim Bowie, he is also one of the immigrants into Texas. He holds a substantial land holdings in the United States as well, but sees the opportunity to explore further financial rewards in silver mines and so forth in the new territory in Texas as well. Then, so really, sort of the open opportunities of this new territory is what Jim Bowie is after. Then we have Davy Crockett. So Davy Crockett, one of the more famous people in the story. Davy Crockett is made famous by the coonskin cap, which he famously is attributed to be wearing. Again, Davy Crockett is very similar to Jim Bowie, a frontiersman, a Kentucky man who, I think he's a Kentucky man who is an outdoorsman, a woodsman, a trapper, somebody who is very, very rough around the edges. He became member of Congress as well in the US Congress, House of Representatives. Didn't really sort of take to it too much, because I think that the nature of politics in Washington DC at this time, and subsequently as well, didn't quite go to his taste as a man who did what he said and says what he does. Quite an honest, straight shooting man. Didn't really go to him didn't really take to him, I should say, or he didn't take to it. But Davy Crockett himself, looking to sort of move to Texas and explore this territory, and derive profit and potential from his visitation and stay there as well. But Davy becomes embroiled within the agitation of the uprising in Texas, and stands by his fellow American citizens and future Texan citizens as well, then, in the defense of the Alamo. So, and the last one really I want to speak about is the General Santa Anna. So, this general, Mexican general, and then later on the President of Mexico, Santa Anna was a very gifted aristocratic general, born in what is now Mexico, but served the royal Spanish army in the initial stages of the Mexican independence movement in the 1820s. He later switched sides to the Mexicans, so I don't know how trustworthy you take people to be switching sides. But yeah, he later on positioned himself, uses his influence, his skill as a general, his cunning as a politician, his exuberance and his arrogance of his noble birth, in order to position himself for a senior leadership position within the new Mexican elite and Mexican government. And he is a very, very opportunistic man, and he does effectively launch an overthrow of the Mexican government and becomes the President of Mexico, as well as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. We see later on in the 1830s. But anyways, let's go to the main story of what this was all about. So we look at the migration, and this is where the crunch point is in. So the migration from America, or the southern United States, to the new Texan region. Texas at the time was joined with another region called Coahuila in Mexico, and like I say, the region was sparsely populated at the time, hence why the desire for migration. But the stream of Anglo-American coming over there with their alien concepts of republican democracy were very, very alien to the indigenous people living there, as well as the descendants of former colonial possessions in Spain and now Mexican government, who, albeit did spout quite a lot of their own democratic republican beliefs. This was effectively very, very much subsumed into a sort of an empire, an all but name really, under Santa Anna, who was effectively commander-in-chief and the president, and at the time a dictatorship. So the immigration is flowing into Texas. We have Stephen Austin going to curry favour with the new Mexican government in 1824. So you really want a constitution for Mexico to make sure that they're able to maintain this immigration, and also for Steve Austin to maintain the influence he has in encouraging people to come across the border as well. In terms of the Mexican attitudes to the Texans, Tejanos, and the Comanche, I mean, the Mexicans didn't really give too much of a shit about the Texan territory. It was, ironically, it is the Wild West before the Wild West was there. They were far removed from Mexico City and the metropolitan places of importance, such as Veracruz in Mexico. So they were really an afterthought, a backwater. Nothing really needed to be cared other than that they were providing a buffer zone to the ever-expanding U.S. territory. The problem, one of the flashpoint problems that was run into early on as well, was that Mexico had emancipated slavery in 1830, and of course slavery in the United States would not cease until 1865. A lot of the people who were emigrating to Texas as well were themselves either slave owners or potential slave owners, with regards to holding their own tracts of land. And this is where there became a bit of a flashpoint, where you had people who wanted to maintain what they thought was their property, chattel slaves, versus the law of the new land in which they wanted to become part of, who says that slavery is illegal, that nobody can be a slave in Mexico. So there was a little bit of a flashpoint there, and compromises reached as well. So the type of immigrants coming over as well was becoming a bit of an issue for the Mexican government at the time. So what we have is, fast forward to 1835, we have a provisional government set up in Texas. The first consultation where people are invited in Texas, Tejanos, natives, and Anglo-Americans, Texans, to set up the first consultation, and we have a vote between people who want to be independent, want an independent Texas, versus the people who would like to remain part of a Mexican federal state, a confederation. Santa Anna had pretty much launched this coup in 1832 to become president of Mexico, and subsequently there were multiple federal uprisings across the Mexican territory at this time. Texas would be one of three, I believe, uprisings at the time. I think one of the only one that really did succeed in breaking away from the main Mexican territory. So we have in the government, the new Texan provisional government, the non-independent, so the people who wanted to remain loyal to the Mexican government, they were in charge, they were ruling the roost, and they were trying to have a pathway of dialogue with Mexico and try to sort of ensure that they had their own autonomy to a degree, all the while deriving the benefit of being part of this Mexican federal territory, if they could. Later on, though, we see there becomes the first flashpoint in the first battle, really, of the the Texan independence. There is the Battle of Gonzales. There is effectively a skirmish where 100 Mexican cavalrymen go to Gonzales, the town of Gonzales, and in the town they have quite a few artillery pieces, cannon artillery, and there's 150 militia volunteers of the Texan Guard there, and they actually win. They win the first battle. They repel the 100 or so cavalrymen away. So effectively, the Texans have, they've opened fire on the Federal troops, and they've, were trying to confiscate arms, and they've told them where to go. I'm not going to mention every single skirmish and battle, just to let you know, because I think there's way too many. There's some too small, some too... I just want to concentrate on the ones that I've actually written some notes about, and I think they're pertinent to the story. So, the next one, so we've got Siege of Gonzales is the first actual fight in the war. Then we move on to the Siege of Behar. So, Behar, there is a town, San Antonio de Behar. Behar is very, very close to that as well. San Antonio is the town that, the city that has the Alamo in it as well. But at this time, the Siege of Behar, so what we've got the main base is at a town called Concepcion. There's a mission where the Mexican commander Cos had a pretty good position there. But the Texans, as well as a brand new regiment of New Orleans Greys recruits, arrive and are able to win the day there. We have Jim Bowie. There's another skirmish at what's known as the Grass Fight. Jim Bowie effectively and his troop try to ambush Federal troops over a hoard of silver that they believe that they can take away and steal from the Federal troops. We've got then two people then, Ben Mile and Frank Johnson, two other commanders as well, and a bunch of irregular forces, just average people with muskets and frontiersmen, woodsmen, Tejanos, farmers, you name it, with a rifle. They storm and they actually win the opportunity to be at the Alamo. So they drive the Mexicans away from the Alamo, which is effectively an old-fashioned religious Spanish mission to basically proselytize, to convert, I should say, the native population to Christianity. So the Alamo is more or less like a big church, and that becomes deserted, and the Mexican commander, of course, surrenders to them. So at this point now, this is where people start raising eyebrows in Mexico and thinking, hang on a minute, we're losing a couple of skirmishes here, we shouldn't be being beaten by the rabble, we've got to sort something out. So at this point we have the second consultation, as it's called, in Texas, effectively like a second vote, or like a second congressional meeting. Sam Houston, as we mentioned earlier on, the former up-and-coming commander turned down on his luck person, is in Texas. Houston is named commander of the Texan Armed Forces. Then we start to have U.S. immigrants are granted bounties to swell the number of the Texan army. So effectively, you've got people, tearaways, runaways, criminals, mercenaries, soldiers of fortune. Anybody you can think of, very much a ragtag group of people, for whatever motivations they had, are offered monetary inducements to join the army of Texas. So that helps swell the numbers by a good few hundred there. We have what's called the Matamoros expedition as well, which effectively ends in anarchy. And then Houston leaves the army to make a peace treaty with the Cherokee Indians, so that the Texans are not confronted they haven't got the ability to fight on two fronts, one against the federal government of Mexico as well as the natives. So he signs a treaty with the Cherokee in order to ensure that they can focus solely on their independence campaign. Santa Anna then launches what is known as the Army of Operations. He has to raise 3 massive loans and really puts the country into debt. Really hoping that he can, recoup at the very least some of the monetary value of the loans that he's got through, taking over the towns in Mexico, and also any sort of anything that the Anglo-American immigrants had left behind, because presumably they would, desert back to their native country after after the Texans are defeated. That's the Mexican thought process at the time. Anyways, you have something now saying we have what's called the Tornell decree. This decree states now, this comes from the Mexican government, the decree says all soldiers in Texan uniform, all soldiers who are lining up alongside the Texans, are now effectively branded as pirates, outlaws, privateers, what have you, and they are enemy combatants. No prisoner is to be afforded any quota, so effectively from here on in, the fighting is very, very vicious, the battles are very, very vicious and bloodthirsty, hand-to-hand combat, because people know they're fighting for their lives. There will not be prisoners taken by the Mexican government. So at this point now, we have Santa Anna is directing his main army of operations towards Bejar, and we have in the way of Bejar is the Alamo, and at the Alamo we have William Travis is the commander of this. Travis is not the strongest man in the Alamo at the time, but he's a very competent and a very how can I put it? He was a very decisive man as well. However, the Alamo and the Texan army that were there in the Alamo were not sufficiently supported by any reinforcements as well as supply line. They were actually told to abandon the Alamo and come back behind the Sabine River, where they would be able to defend the river crossings more competently than the Alamo. But we know through history and through the tales and the folklore that the Alamo battle would be infamous. And so we have different characters all coming together now at the Alamo. We have Davy Crockett is there, the congressman who is chancing his arm to come to Texas to better his own life, is embroiled now in this Texan independence movement. We've got Jim Bowie, who vastly wealthy, owner, tradesman, slave owner, slave trader, land proprietor. This man is here. Bowie's down on his luck. He's unfortunately his wife and children had died of cholera a couple of years before that. He got sucked into gambling and drinking, and really be that sort of outlaw, Wild West sort of life that people get down in their luck onto. He's been embroiled in that, and he finds himself with a redeeming opportunity to fight the Alamo for a cause bigger than himself. So, as I said, no quota given to the Texans. The Alamo, I would say go watch a couple of the movies about the Alamo, whether this is the 1960s version or the one from 2004, the Disney version. Either are okay. I do like the 2004 one, a little bit more modern, but the Siege of the Alamo does go according to form. The unfortunately for the Texans, they were only able to withstand, I believe, 2 to 3 days worth of being surrounded, barrage. They did put up a stern defence, but unfortunately the sheer numbers of the Mexican federal forces overwhelmed them, and 600 Mexicans died, which was an incredible amount of soldiers to have died. I mean, the logical military option for this, if you'd read his Sun Tzu, this is Santa Anna now, would have been to allow one open side of retreat for the Texans, so that they would be able to flee and Santa Anna to reconquer this territory and this mission. But he wanted to deal. He wanted to make an example of the people in the Alamo. Women and children were able to flee. For those who did, those who stayed behind, the volunteers and people, the people at the the Alamo, they were killed. We did have they did try to send out a volunteer reinforcement army under I think it's Juan Seguin, who is a famous Tejano who fought for the Texan cause in the Texan independence movement. He unfortunately wasn't able to rustle up enough of an army to really repel Santa Anna's professionally trained federal force, and you know they were absolutely massacred at the Alamo, and Mexico lost a third of their army to this. It was a pointless exercise to try and scale the walls and also to run directly into the artillery fire when they could have smashed the Alamo to rubble for a couple of days. But two things: one, Santa Anna was arrogant and wanted to deal a substantial blow and set an example about the people in the Alamo, and two was the supply lines at that time didn't really sort of make it favourable to do a week or 2 weeks sort of siege or destruction of the Alamo. They didn't get it over and done with there, but again, 600 troops is quite a lot to lose in one. We have then what's called the Goliad campaign. So in Goliad, the Texan consultation, the provisional government asked for General Fannin to invade Goliad and to see if they could, sort of get some support there, get some soldiers, instigate the area of Goliad in order to rebel further against the Mexican federal government. But unfortunately, General Urrea, who for me I think was a more capable commander than Santa Anna, surrounded General Fannin and the Texans at the Battle of Coleto. So that was a fucking absolute disaster and an excursion that the Texans could really ill afford if they wanted to go head to head with Santa Anna's Mexican army. Anyways, moving on, we have the 1836 Texan Convention. And in that, finally, the Independence Party votes for independence. Texas declares they are now among the new nations of the world. They repudiate any loyalty to the Mexican Constitution of 1824. They are their own nation, and they're going to fight for their independence. At this time, they are given an absolute fucking Christmas present by Santa Anna. Santa Anna, the Mexican commander and president, decides to divide his already battered forces as he chases the remnants of the Texian army across its vast territory. And at this point, the Texan army retreats, and Sam Houston was really on the verge of being removed as commander at this point. His instinct as a Jacksonian was to go headlong, but the best way to maintain the Texian army in resistance was to draw Santa Anna further into Texas, further extend the supply lines, give Texas more time to generate more people coming over the border from America, to swell the ranks of the army, and buy more time so they can have that one climactic battle, which they did end up having. So, Houston has constantly retreated. He's not offering battle at all to Santa Anna. Santa Anna is relentless in his pursuit, but he has totally slipped up and he's divided his forces into two. He can really ill afford to do that. So they collected more volunteers, the Texan army. Mexicans advance, and Houston rouses the army with the famous phrase of "Remember the Alamo." So we have the famous Battle of San Jacinto. There's a massive monument there that commemorates the battle today. You have the Mexican army are off guard. They are pitched up and camped at that point in San Jacinto, and the Texan army, not believing in their luck, the fact that they've caught this half of the Texan army, as well as the main commanders of the Texan army are there, including Santa Anna himself. They decide, camouflaged, they outmaneuver the Texan army, and they won a very, very quick one-sided battle. And there were 600 soldiers killed on the Mexican side versus roughly around 11 or handfuls of the Texans who were killed in hand-to-hand fighting. This was very, very much a surprise attack, and Houston there rode on horseback and ushered the army onto the brilliantly dressed, brilliantly supplied, reasonably supplied Mexican federal forces. And Santa Anna tries to disguise himself as a mere soldier so that he doesn't have to be ransomed or, meet Houston or the disgrace as a commander to admit defeat. But he's pointed out by his own soldiers about who the Presidente is. And Santa Anna there's a famous painting of Santa Anna surrendering to Houston. Houston is laid up, sat against a tree because he's shot through the ankle, I believe, or the lower leg. And they've avenged the Alamo. There was unbelievable carnage from the Texans against the Mexicans. But obviously, with the Alamo fresh in people's minds, then revenge was very, very much on the cards, at San Jacinto. So the Mexican army supply lines break down. The head of the snake, Santa Anna, he's taken out. The committee's taken out, and we have the artillery is being destroyed. Mexican artillery is destroyed and useless as well. And effectively, this is where we get to the climax of the book, which is the peace treaty between Mexico and Texas. Now, Mexico would have a couple of arguments and have a couple of goes, mainly to, put it forward to Texas that, hang on a minute, you guys, we don't really recognise that you are your own independent nation. In which case, this is why Texas was also pushing very, very hard after 1836 to become part of the United States of America, and to be a new territory incorporated within. I think the book overall, going back to so that is the story. Overall, I thought the book was fantastic. I mean, it's a lot for me to remember going back 4 months ago, but I think the main players in the book, I really, really enjoyed reading about Sam Houston and also Jim Bowie, two people very, very much of their time, as well as Santa Anna, quite a complex character. Incredible that somebody like that can be alive at any one time and be in charge of a nation. But I think overall though the book was absolutely superb. And an introduction, it is very, very very well worth your money, very well written, excellently read by Chuck Montgomery, the narrator as well. And go back onto Amazon to see how much this book is. I mean, you're looking at it, for the Kindle version is $10.99. Audible, I would probably say, is your best bet there. I mean, if you do like to collect history books like H.W. Brands, and if you want to get that paperback or hardcover, you won't go too far wrong. But I went for the Audible version, quite a long one, but very, very enjoyable. And an excellent story, and an incredible story of, like I say, a ragtag bunch of immigrants who go in and defeat a reasonably supplied and a reasonably trained federal force. It's a fantastic story. I hope you enjoyed listening to my summary of the book. And if you wouldn't mind giving me a like after the video, subscribe to the channel if you can, share it if you think it's good enough to be shared as well. I very much hope so. And let me know if there's any books, films, or anything at all you'd like me to review, and also to any recommendations from yourselves would be much appreciated. Just to leave off my summary for this book, I'm going to give this book a very good 3.5 stars out of 5. This is a fantastic first sort of introduction to the topic. It is all-encompassing. It's a narrative as well. Very, very good at building characters and the importance of events as well as giving you the narrative of the story. So yeah, enjoy it. Brilliant. Well done. Very enjoyable.